What would you do if the father you admired your whole life suddenly betrayed your trust? In this shocking story, we explore the aftermath of one family barbecue that changed everything. A son faces the painful truth about his dad and fights to protect his wife from betrayal. Can a family survive when trust is broken? We are about to find out what happened in this story, but if you like stories like this one, don't forget to like and subscribe. Doing this really helps the channel grow. Now onto the story. Jake always felt a warm, comforting presence in his life, his father, Tom. Growing up, Tom was more than just a dad, he was a cheerleader, a mentor, and a friend. From the very beginning, Jake knew he could count on him for anything. At school, Tom was always in the front row at Jake's events, waving a homemade sign and wearing a goofy grin. When Jake joined the school soccer team, he was nervous about the pressure. "What if I mess up?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tom knelt down to meet his eye, his expression serious yet encouraging. "You won't, buddy, just play your game and have fun. I'm proud of you no matter what." With his father's words echoing in his mind, Jake took a deep breath and gave it his all. When he scored his first goal, he glanced over to see Tom jumping up and down, a wide smile lighting up his face. At home, peace reigned. Jake couldn't recall a single fight between his parents, Tom and Linda. They were a team, always communicating with kindness. Tom had a way of surprising Linda with little gestures, a simple flower picked from their garden or a handwritten note tucked into her lunch. Just because, he'd say with a playful wink. Jake watched, soaking in how his father treated his mother with love and respect, and it shaped his understanding of what a healthy relationship looked like. Weekends were adventures waiting to happen. Whether they were hiking through the woods or turning the kitchen into a chaotic baking zone, every moment was filled with laughter. One rainy Saturday, Tom declared it was fort building time. They piled blankets and cushions in the living room, creating a cozy hideaway. Inside, they shared stories and snuggled up with popcorn, making memories that Jake would cherish forever. As Jake entered his teenage years, life became a bit more complicated. School pressures and friendship dramas began to weigh on him. One evening, after a tough day, he slumped at the kitchen table, feeling defeated. Without a word, Tom sat beside him, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Want to talk about it?" he asked gently. Jake opened up about his frustrations, and Tom listened intently, offering advice and support without judgment. Just knowing his dad was there made all the difference. When it came time for college, Jake felt a mix of excitement and fear. "What if I fail?" he confided in Tom one night, anxiety creeping in. Tom smiled softly, his eyes filled with understanding. "You won't fail, son. You're capable of so much more than you realize. And remember, no matter where you are, I'll always be here for you." Those words became Jake's anchor, giving him the courage to take the leap into the unknown. Years later, as Jake settled into adulthood, he often reflected on the lessons Tom taught him. His father's unwavering support and kindness shaped him into the person he was becoming. He aimed to be just as supportive to his friends and, someday, to his own family. One quiet evening, as Jake prepared to visit his father for dinner, he felt a wave of gratitude. He knew he was lucky to have a father who was not just a provider, but a genuine source of love and encouragement. He couldn't wait to share stories of his own adventures and continue the legacy of kindness and support that Tom had built so lovingly over the years. When Jake announced his engagement, his father, Tom, couldn't contain his joy. After years of being an only child, the idea of welcoming a daughter into the family filled him with excitement. Tom had always been the kind of father who embraced life's milestones wholeheartedly, and this was no exception. From the moment Jake shared the news, Tom began planning a special dinner to celebrate. He pulled out all the stops, preparing Jake's favorite meal, his famous barbecue ribs, and decorating the dining room with fresh flowers. "It's a celebration," he declared, beaming as he set the table. Tom even insisted on inviting close family friends to share in the joy, excited to introduce his soon-to-be daughter-in-law to everyone. On the day of the engagement party, Tom welcomed Jake's fiancée, Emily, with open arms. He greeted her with a warm hug, saying, "Welcome to the family. I've been waiting for you." His enthusiasm was infectious, and Emily couldn't help but smile, feeling instantly embraced by the warmth of the family. Tom spent the evening making sure she felt special, asking her about her interests and sharing stories from Jake's childhood. He even took her aside to show her the family photo albums, narrating fond memories that made her laugh and feel at home. As the wedding date approached, Tom went above and beyond to ensure everything was perfect. He offered to help plan the wedding, suggesting ideas and even volunteering to take care of the logistics. "I want this day to be unforgettable for both of you," he said, his eyes twinkling with pride. He coordinated with vendors, helped design invitations, and even insisted on hosting a pre-wedding barbecue for family and friends to celebrate their union. On the day of the wedding, Tom walked Emily down the aisle, a radiant smile on his face. He beamed with pride, treating her as if she were already his daughter. He whispered encouraging words to her as they made their way, ensuring she felt calm and supported. During his speech at the reception, he spoke from the heart, sharing how happy he was to have her in their family and how much he admired her for making Jake so incredibly happy. For Jake, watching his father embrace Emily so wholeheartedly was a source of immense joy. He felt grateful for the seamless transition into their new family dynamic, never once suspecting that anything could disrupt this blissful moment. Tom's flawless record as a devoted father only reinforced Jake's belief that everything was perfect. Little did he know, this beautiful facade would soon become more complicated than he could ever imagine. As the months passed after the wedding, Tom found every excuse to invite Jake and Emily over for family gatherings. Barbecues became a regular occurrence, with Tom enthusiastically grilling in the backyard, relishing every moment spent with his son and new daughter-in-law. The aroma of sizzling burgers and marinated chicken wafted through the air as laughter echoed, creating an inviting atmosphere filled with warmth. Tom took great pride in showcasing his culinary skills, eager to impress Emily with his barbecue expertise. But beneath that joyful exterior, a subtle shift began to take shape, one that Emily couldn't quite put her finger on at first. Tom often focused his attention on Emily, asking her endless questions about her interests, her family, and even her childhood memories. "Tell me more about your favorite recipes," he would say, leaning in with genuine interest, his eyes sparkling with curiosity. Initially, Emily appreciated the attention, feeling welcomed and valued in the family. She enjoyed sharing her culinary passion with Tom and was flattered by his compliments. However, as time went on, she started to sense something was amiss. His enthusiasm felt overwhelming, and she couldn't shake the feeling that his intentions were becoming too personal, too intrusive for a father-in-law. Every time Jake's parents visited, Tom would lavish praise on Emily. "Your cooking is incredible. You're such a wonderful wife," he would say, his tone dripping with admiration. While compliments are always nice, Emily began to feel uncomfortable with the intensity of his remarks. The way he watched her, the way his gaze lingered just a moment too long, began to make her uneasy. It was as if he was examining her, not just as a daughter-in-law, but as something more. Then there were the texts. At first, they seemed harmless, messages about the weather or sharing a funny meme. But as the days went by, the topics became increasingly mundane, as if Tom was searching for any excuse to stay in touch. "Did you see the latest episode of that show you like?" or "How's the new recipe you tried?" began to invade her phone. It felt like he was trying to create a connection that extended beyond typical fatherly interest, and it began to weigh heavily on Emily. Each ping of her phone made her stomach turn, as she dreaded what the next message would be. Feeling increasingly uneasy, she decided to distance herself from Tom, carefully crafting excuses to avoid one-on-one interactions. When Jake would suggest visiting his parents, she would subtly suggest other plans or express fatigue. "Maybe we could take a trip this weekend instead," she'd offer, trying to divert the idea away from his family. She didn't want to hurt her husband's feelings or create tension, especially since he viewed his father as the perfect role model. Jake would often brush off her hesitations, attributing them to typical married life and adjusting to new family dynamics. As weeks turned into months, Jake remained blissfully unaware of the discomfort brewing beneath the surface. To him, Tom was still the supportive, loving father he had always known. He couldn't fathom that his father's behavior might be crossing boundaries. "Dad just really cares about you," he'd say with a smile, completely oblivious to the unease in Emily's heart. He thought it was wonderful how his father had embraced Emily as part of the family, believing that their close bond was a testament to how much his father valued her. As the days turned into weeks, the tension grew heavier. Emily grappled with the dilemma of whether to bring her feelings to Jake. She wanted to protect their marriage and keep the family dynamic intact, but the weight of the situation was becoming increasingly difficult to bear. The once warm and inviting relationship with her father-in-law was now tinged with confusion and discomfort, leaving her feeling trapped between loyalty to her husband and her growing concerns. She began to feel isolated, unsure of how to express her discomfort without sounding ungrateful or causing unnecessary friction in her marriage. Each visit felt like walking a tightrope, balancing between the need to maintain harmony and the urgent desire to protect herself from the unsettling advances of the man who was supposed to be a father figure. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the backyard as the aroma of grilled meats filled the air. Jake and Emily were at Tom and Linda's house, enjoying what had become a familiar weekend ritual, a lively barbecue filled with laughter and family. The atmosphere was festive, with friends and relatives mingling, but as Emily found herself in the kitchen, preparing side dishes, an unsettling tension began to creep in. Tom entered the kitchen, a broad smile on his face, clearly in high spirits. "Emily, this looks amazing," he exclaimed, his voice a bit louder than usual. She smiled back, appreciating the compliment but sensing a shift in his demeanor. "You've really outdone yourself," he continued, stepping closer to her as he leaned against the counter. At first, Emily brushed off the slight discomfort she felt. Perhaps he had just had a bit too much to drink. "Thank you, Tom," she replied, trying to keep the mood light. However, as he drew nearer, she caught a whiff of the strong scent of alcohol on his breath. It made her stomach twist uneasily. Tom leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, but the words came out muffled and slurred. Emily strained to catch what he said, but the only clear sound was the unsettling edge in his tone. She instinctively backed away, pressing herself against the kitchen counter, her heart racing. "What's wrong, dear?" he asked, a hint of mischief in his eyes as he moved even closer. "Don't be shy," he said, a smirk forming on his lips. "I know you want this too." The implications of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. She felt her world tilt, panic rising as she pushed him away with both hands. "Tom, stop," she exclaimed, her voice sharp with alarm. In that moment, everything shifted. The festive laughter from the backyard faded into a distant echo as she bolted past him, her heart pounding in her chest. She rushed out of the kitchen, her breath coming in quick gasps, desperate to find Jake. He was standing by the grill, chatting animatedly with friends, blissfully unaware of the storm that had just erupted in the kitchen. "Jake," she said, her voice shaky as she reached his side. He turned to her, concern washing over his face as he noticed her distress. "What's wrong?" he asked, his brow furrowing. I'm not feeling well," she stammered, her eyes darting back toward the kitchen where Tom stood. "Can we leave?" The words tumbled out before she could second-guess herself. Jake studied her for a moment, the laughter around them fading into silence as he registered her unease. "Are you sure?" "We can stay a bit longer," he offered, his instinct to comfort her kicking in. "No, please," she insisted, her voice trembling. "I really need to go." She felt guilty for pulling him away from his family, but the look in Tom's eyes lingered in her mind, and she couldn't shake the feeling of being trapped. Jake nodded, sensing the urgency in her tone. "Okay, let's go." He took her hand, leading her away from the cheerful chaos of the barbecue, leaving behind the laughter that now felt foreign and distant. As they walked to the car, Emily felt a mix of relief and fear. She knew she had to confront what had happened, but the weight of it all pressed heavily on her chest, and she wasn't sure how to find the words to explain. When they arrived home, Emily felt a whirlwind of emotion swirling inside her. She had made up her mind, she needed to tell Jake everything. The weight of her experiences with Tom had become unbearable, and she knew keeping it to herself was no longer an option. Yet, as she paced their living room, anxiety gripped her. Where would she even begin? Taking a deep breath, she called Jake over and sat him down. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern as he noticed the seriousness etched on her face. "Jake, I need to talk to you about something important," she began, her voice trembling. She hesitated, trying to find the right words to convey the chaos in her heart. With tears brimming in her eyes, she finally opened up about Tom's constant texts and the inappropriate comments that had made her increasingly uncomfortable. Each revelation felt like a weight lifted, but also a new burden placed upon her. As she spoke, she could feel the tremors of emotion welling up, and she broke into tears. "I thought it was just me, but it's not right." He crossed a line. For a moment, silence enveloped them. She braced herself for disbelief, half expecting Jake to question her, to brush her concerns aside. But instead, he reached out, pulling her into an embrace. "I'm so sorry," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have seen the sign sooner. I should have protected you." Relief washed over her as she sank into his arms, feeling his warmth envelop her. His compassion was a balm to her frayed nerves, even as she sensed the fury simmering beneath the surface. "You didn't do anything wrong," he continued, his tone steady but laced with anger. "I can't believe he would act like this. From now on, I promise I'll protect you." Emily could feel the intensity of his feelings, his anger toward his father, his fierce protectiveness over her. It was a whirlwind of emotions, but in that moment, all she needed was his support. She knew they would have to confront Tom together, but for now, she felt safe. With Jake by her side, she finally believed they could face whatever challenges lay ahead, united against the darkness that had intruded on their lives. If anything, Emily felt a sense of relief that she had waited until they were home to share her story with Jake. The thought of revealing Tom's behavior at the barbecue, surrounded by family and laughter, was unbearable. She couldn't imagine the fallout that would have erupted, the chaos that would have ensued, but as if the universe had conspired to turn their private moment into a nightmare, a sudden knock on the door jolted them both from their embrace. "Hey, son, open up." Tom's voice slurred drunkenly from the other side. "You can't just leave without telling us." His tone was a mix of anger and confusion, and Jake's heart raced at the sound. He had never heard his father like this before, and the sight of his drunken state filled him with a growing sense of dread. Jake's anger surged as he stood up, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "What the hell?" he muttered under his breath. Emily reached out, trying to pull him back. "Jake, please. Just let it go. Don't open the door." But the voice of his mother, Linda, filtered through the door, surprising him. "Tom, what are you doing?" she asked, her tone laced with concern. Hearing her voice calmed him, but it also reignited his determination. He needed to show his mother what kind of man Tom truly was. Taking a deep breath, he walked to the door, his resolve hardening. He was ready to confront his father and reveal everything that had happened. He opened the door slowly, steeling himself for the confrontation. As soon as he laid eyes on Tom, a mix of disappointment and fury washed over him. Tom stood there, swaying slightly, a creepy grin plastered across his face as his gaze landed on Emily. That smile, once comforting, now felt like a taunt, a reminder of the boundaries his father had crossed. Without thinking, Jake's rage boiled over. "Get away from her," he shouted, the words exploding from him. In an instant, he swung his fist, connecting with Tom's jaw with a sickening thud. The impact echoed in the stillness of the night, and Tom crumpled to the ground, unconscious. Emily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as she watched the scene unfold in shock. Jake stood frozen for a moment, heart racing, realizing the gravity of what he had just done. He had never imagined striking his father, yet in that moment, it felt like the only option. "Jake," Emily started, her voice trembling. He turned to her, breathing heavily. "I couldn't let him keep treating you like that. Not anymore." The adrenaline was still coursing through him, but guilt began to creep in as he glanced at his father lying on the floor. Just then, Linda stepped forward, her face a mixture of concern and confusion. "What happened?" she asked, taking in the sight of Tom on the ground. Jake swallowed hard, ready to spill everything. "Mom, I need you to listen. It's about Dad, what he's been doing to Emily." The words tumbled out, and he quickly recounted the events that had led to this moment. He could see the shock and disbelief in his mother's eyes as she processed the information. As he finished, he looked at Emily, who stood by his side, her expression a mix of fear and support. "We can't let this go on. You need to know what kind of man he really is," he said firmly, hoping that Linda would understand the urgency of the situation. In that charged moment, with Tom still lying motionless on the floor, the truth hung heavy in the air. After that night, everything changed. Jake felt like he had entered a new world where his father was no longer the man he had always looked up to. Determined to protect Emily, he decided to cut all ties with Tom. He blocked him on social media, deleted his number, and vowed to keep his father away from his wife. It was a necessary step to feel safe again after the chaos that had unfolded. As days turned into weeks, Tom sobered up, and it seemed like he realized what he had done. But instead of reaching out or apologizing, he chose to stay distant. Jake felt confused. Did Tom understand the weight of his actions? The silence was hard to bear, leaving Jake with a mix of emotions he couldn't quite sort out. Although his parents didn't separate, there was a noticeable tension between them. Linda often looked worried, caught between concern for both her husband and son. Jake could see that the events had shaken her, and there were arguments at home. Still, she stood by Tom, trying to navigate the troubled waters of their marriage. This commitment reminded Jake of the love she still had for a man he could no longer respect. As Jake's anger faded, he sank into sadness. It felt like he had lost a father, the father he had always admired. The ideal image he had of Tom crumbled, leaving only disappointment. Jake struggled to reconcile the father he knew with the man who had hurt Emily. He also felt a twinge of anger toward his mother for staying with Tom. How could she support him after what he had done? Yet, deep down, Jake understood he couldn't control her choices. Respecting her decision was the only way to move forward, even if it felt like a betrayal to his own feelings. In quiet moments at home, Jake often thought about their family. Memories of happy times with Tom now felt stained by what had happened. He couldn't find it in himself to forgive, and that struggle left a heavy ache in his heart. Each day served as a reminder of the gap that had opened up, not just between him and his father, but also within himself. As weeks turned into months, the tension in their family lingered like a dark cloud, unspoken, but felt by all. Jake knew healing would take time, and the road ahead would be difficult. But for Emily, he was determined to be strong. Together, they would build a new life, free from the shadows of the past, even as the echoes of their once close family hung in the air.
Thank you for watching this video. If you made it this far, please consider subscribing. I post stories like this on the regular. See you on the next one.